Hello, everyone. It's Jeff Rich here. Welcome to the Burning Archive live stream. I can see, I think Felix already adding to the chat. If you're coming here for the first time, you might be interested in my review of Donald Trump's first 100 days. It's been an interesting set of 100 days, hasn't it? And part of that 100 days has been a DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. I am a author, historian, and former government official, 30 years, 33 years, in fact, as a government official. And I think you'll find that my thoughts on what the sort of reality of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency really is, the dog days of DOGE, what they really are, will be, I think, helpful to you. Everyone around the world is trying to make sense of Donald Trump. Is it chaos? Is it an aberration? Is it the end of the post-war world order? Is it the end of the American Republic? Is it a cultural revolution, if not quite as deadly and violent yet as the Chinese Cultural Revolution? They're the kind of questions we'll be looking at today. So I hope you can all join me. And I'm sort of doing this today on I'm sort of on StreamYard for the first time today. So if I'm occasionally a little bit sort of held back by the technical details, I hope you don't mind. Do say hello, and do also like and share the video. It really helps with the algorithm, helps spread the word. If you hit that like button now, it will promote the video out to more people. I guess, critical, objective, slightly less than sort of low-grade geopolitical commentary that I offer here really does need a bit of your support on the algorithm. There's a lot of commentary out there on YouTube at the moment. I think a lot of it's not terribly well informed, and I think what I can offer you here is a lot better. So do feel free to share and like, and hit the thanks button if you like. And hello to Joshua Pym and Gabrielle Demarche, and of course Felix as well. All right, so I will get straight into the show, and like last time, I think the last one or two lives I've done, I will also release sort of highlights of the live a little bit later. I'm not planning to do, like I did last time, a 3-hour live this time. I will try to sort of keep it a little bit more controlled. And the real focus of the discussion today is what's happening with the American government, not so much in terms of its foreign policy, although that's certainly related, and I certainly have commented on that in my previous live and on various videos and interviews on other channels, but what's going on within America itself, within the American government itself. Many people are talking about a crisis in the sort of American political constitution, a crisis in the republic. Many people are concerned about, I guess, autocracy or whatever, or what Donald Trump represents. A lot of people got very excited when Donald Trump first came into office and talked up his MAGA revolution as the start of a golden age. But I kind of think it's been really more of a bit of 100 dog days, of course, referring to a sort of sense of lethargy and difficulty and things not working out so well. Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the USA's what I call toxic triangle that Donald Trump has revealed in these last 100 days. Now, my perspective on things is Donald Trump is not looking like he's going to be a great president. His tariffs have been a fiasco. His peace negotiations have been ill-conceived. His domestic policies are not going too well either. And but I think Donald Trump is people tend to fixate on Donald Trump, the individual, Donald Trump, the symbol. And I think what Donald Trump's first 100 days and the reaction to Donald Trump in these first 100 days really reveals is actually a bigger problem within America. And I'll go into that in a moment. And I also think in the first 100 days, I think there's been failure across the board, but similarly in domestic policy, economic, social, and governance policy, DOGE in particular. And I think, of course, there's also been failures in foreign policy, but I'm not going to talk about those today. I won't go into the tariffs too much either. But I think, again, Donald Trump's failure over these last 100 days reflects a longer-term set of problems within America, a much bigger sorry, I was just checking the chat there. Thanks for those comments, Felix and everyone. And it's a much bigger set of problems that have been revealed in America. And that's what I really mean by the toxic triangle. I think that is causing problems with the extent to which whatever an American government aims to do, whether it can really do it. Then I'm going to have a bit of a deep dive into DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk. And despite him being the world's richest man, a cult figure in some quarters, very confident in his opinions, I kind of think DOGE is a bit of a joke response to a serious problem. There's no doubt that there's a serious problem, and Elon Musk channels that sometimes when he talks about what DOGE has done. But I think, as I think I'll show you today, I think it's really a bit of a incompetent response to the problems of American government finance. And I guess there are a lot of people going on about this in YouTube, a lot of people in America who've got an interest, I guess, party interest, and a lot of people who are journalists or commentators who really have had very little experience on the inside of government and what actually reducing government spending, fixing government finance is really like. Over the 33 years of my government career, there was a lot of effort on those fronts. And I think I'll try to sort of feed some of that experience into my observations on DOGE, because I also think DOGE is not the first time the American government has failed to fix its budget problem. It's been a running sore for a long time. So DOGE, the fact that such an incompetent response has come up to deal with such a serious problem as, what the government spends its money on and how it raises its taxes is a symbol of the failure of the US political system. And then I'll give my sort of overall summary of that the USA is trapped in the shallow state. It's not going through a cultural revolution. It's not going into a golden age. It's also not in a chaotic situation. In fact, it's more paralyzed. It's more, and this is where the arguments about continuity really kick in to some degree. It's sort of stuck in a trap of how its political, social, and cultural systems work. And I'll have an interesting historical comparison that I've been talking about on my Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. You can join my world history tour. I've just completed my world history tour of America over 8 weeks, looking at a whole lot of new sort of perspectives on America. And also I have just started my tour of China. And in fact, it's a comparison from China that I will be looking at. So that's what we're sort of doing in the stream. And by all means, give us a like, send in a chat comment, and I'll sort of respond to them as we go along. But I kind of want to sort of deliver the main content and sort of come back to the chat after little breaks. But I'd love your support. If anything about this video really resonates with you, do go over to jeffrich.substack.com, become either a free subscriber or a paid subscriber, and which is just $5 US a month or $50 US a year. Bit of a savings there. And also, if you like, you can support me here through the thanks button. And I have also included in the video description, you can check if you like, a link to my book, which I have here. Here we go. 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. That's a picture of Mencius, the Confucian philosopher from China. Talked about statecraft. And my book there includes my reflections on my life working in government, as well as discussion of a whole lot of issues actually quite relevant to what we're talking about today in the stream. So if any of this is of interest to you, do head over to the link in the video description below and pick up a copy of my book. It's available both as a Kindle ebook or as a paperback. I think obviously the Kindle is a bit cheaper. All right, let us forge on, and let's go to my little presentation here, and we'll talk about the USA's toxic triangle under Trump. I'll probably go in and out of the presentation during the show. So again, it's not a cultural revolution. If you think about the scale of what happened in China under the Cultural Revolution, both the scale of violence and the scale of destruction and other things, it's simply not that. It certainly has some elements that are in common, rivals being pushed aside, old ideas being discarded, old ideologies being reaffirmed, and some level of mass mobilization. But it's simply not like the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and I think I've written about that a little bit more over at my Substack. But nor is it random chaos. I mean, there's certainly an element of disorderly, unusual conduct by Donald Trump in his office. There's certainly some level of difference from prior political conventions, but it's not pure chaos. There's a lot of institutional momentum going on. There's a lot of personnel momentum going on. But nor is it also a pure aberration. I think some people around the world are certainly thinking that perhaps, they can wait it out until Donald Trump is gone, and then the good America will come back and everything will go back to normal the way it was. But I think that is a bit of an illusion. Of course, it might be good here just to comment that here we are looking at the election results in Canada have just come through, and why don't I just quickly share with you those election results. I think you can see those. Yes. Okay. So there's been quite a convincing, I guess, win by the Liberal Party, led by Mark Carney, former central banker of both Britain and Canada. I think that's probably a historical first of a central banker of two major G7 countries becoming a prime minister. And the Liberal coalition won 43 or nearly 44% of the vote. The Conservatives a little over 41%, and the Québécois bloc, the bloc based around the French-speaking province of Quebec, won about 6%, with a few other parties getting votes as well. So it's interesting, actually. In total, it's just short of a majority at this point, but no doubt the votes will sort of come in and they will end up in the lead. So I think this is really quite a setback for Donald Trump, isn't it? It's clearly in part a vote rejecting Donald Trump's offer, let's say, for Canada to become the 51st state. So again, another setback for Donald Trump. But let me talk about now this sort of toxic triangle of what's going on in the United States. And this is very much what I've been talking about in my World History Tour at jeffrich.substack.com, sort of trying to provide a bit of an analysis of some different perspectives on American history and how it kind of makes sense of the fall of American primacy today and the difficulties America is having responding. And I'll come back to that a little bit later on. So there's this threefold toxic every triangle is three-pointed, three dimensions of this trap that America is in, this toxic triangle. It has a bloated empire. It has, the legendary 800 military bases all around the world. It spends 40% of the world's military budget, not counting all the intelligence operations and all that kind of stuff, for 4% of the world's population, who are in a pretty good defensive position. Most of that military spending is outside the United States. It's also, and this has been the theme of the Emmanuel Todd book, The Defeat of the West, in a deep socio-cultural crisis. I've talked about that a lot on the channel, and you can check those videos, so I won't go into it in too much depth now. But that social crisis is evident in the domestic policy failures in America, both in the poor government leadership as well as in the failure to address deep underlying problems. And thirdly, its political system is broken. It has a broken republic. So since 20th of January and Trump's inauguration speech, where he declared the beginning of a new golden age, we've gone from failed DOGE to, the fiasco of the tariffs to the tragic failure to negotiate a genuine peace with all parties in Ukraine, Russia, and Europe, and so many failures on so many fronts. And the problems that will come from the tariffs are only now starting to show up in empty shelves and higher prices and lost jobs and all that sort of thing. So Trump has taken America, or the United States of America, in 100 days from a golden age to a broken, shallow republic. And it's showing in his job approval ratings. So this is from Statista, which has sourced its statistics from Real Clear Politics with the Real Clear Politics average. And you can see there that the approval rating of Trump has fallen a week after his inauguration speech from 50.5% to 45.3%. It's dropped 5%, or if you like, 10% of his total approval has gone over 3 months. Similarly, his disapproval rating has increased from 44.3% to 52.4%, which is, what's that? That's 8 points, or between 1/5 and 1/6 of an increase of between 1/5 or 1/6 of the his disapproval, of approximately a 20% increase in his disapproval over 3 months. So not going too well on that front. And but also, despite all the elation of some people, and I've commented in some of my previous videos, like on the Duran and stuff, about some of the false elation. A lot of people, I guess, got sucked in by the rhetoric, sucked in by their own hopes, perhaps. And, people in the world do like to see the world as they want it to be, rather than perhaps it really is. But similarly, I've been struck by the ineffectiveness, let's say, of the response of many of the critics of Donald Trump in America. At one level, it's hysterically over the top about, fascism and all that kind of stuff. Timothy Snyder's fled the country, allegedly, not to be closer to all his Ukrainian supporters in Canada, but rather to flee fascism in the United States. It's a pretty tough life as a Yale professor. But similarly, this is the current Fighting Oligarchy tour that's been organised by AOC and Bernie Sanders, and really the idea that suddenly oligarchy has appeared on the American stage with Donald Trump again is just a little bit silly. So it's not just Donald Trump who's not, doing well. It is, in fact, across the board in America. It really is across the board that there's a difficulty in adapting to this decline in American primacy and to the chronic, recurrent, large problems of, government, organization, social problems, imperial foreign policy problems, and sort of cultural issues within America. America really does seem trapped in that toxic triangle, and it's having problems getting out. And this is where we have a bit of a look at the way in which this failure is happening across the board. And, of course, I'm talking to you from Australia, and it's certainly been my observation that just as in the Canada election, here in Australia, Donald Trump is a factor in the upcoming election in Australia on the 3rd of May. It will be interesting. The current opposition leader and, one or two of the minor political parties have sort of associated themselves, rhetorically at least, with Donald Trump. And that is becoming a big drag on their political support. It may well lead to a relatively underwhelming, unpopular government getting re-elected as a result. So Donald Trump is, in a way, I guess, giving people an excuse all around the world to say, gee, I know we probably should have realized this earlier, but America's a bit on the nose. And I guess it's okay to say that now because it's been led by Donald Trump rather than someone we'd like to support like Barack Obama or perhaps more comically, Joe Biden. Okay, so let's have a look at these failures, and they're across the board in the economy. We've had the fiasco of the tariffs. The tariffs are on fire, by which I mean not just they're going down, not just they're in a burning archive somewhere, but that they're on America's economy has been exposed as a financial insurance real estate economy rather than a real manufacturing economy. And you can't just bring all that manufacturing back home by threats and tariffs. And it's also exposed the sort of crumbling infrastructure, the lack of social and economic infrastructure to actually genuinely support America becoming a industrial powerhouse of the world. It hasn't yet really come to terms with the fact that it is now only roughly 15% of the world's real economy by GDP PPP terms, and that, if you like, a lot of that is in services. A lot of that's in Google and YouTube and StreamYard and all the services I'm using right now. Hollywood, financial services as well, rather than and those things potentially could also move rather more quickly perhaps than setting up a complex manufacturing plant in America. But it's also a big problem in society. Emmanuel Todd's book on the defeat of the West focuses on the social crisis in America, and in particular the alarming fact that its health performance is so bad. I did a video about this just the other day, and there's a link to that video in the video description below, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those stats in a second. But Emmanuel Todd also makes the point that there's a sort of a nihilism, sort of a destructive lack of belief in anything collective in the United States and more broadly in the West at the moment. And I think in a way they're increasingly being exposed as being dependent on other civilizations. And again, Emmanuel Todd focuses on this idea, not because he hates America, but because for years and years and years he admired America. But he's found that it is simply no longer an appealing culture. He says he used the idea of nihilism to deal with the problem that, in essence, many intellectuals or commentators or just general citizens around the world in Anglophone and also in Western countries, broadly Western countries, even many people in China, America, Russia, all around the world, wanted to believe in America, really believed in America. He says their problem deep down is we love America. So something needs to explain the fact that America has gone from a force for good to a force for evil in the world. And that's what he uses this concept of nihilism about. And then finally, the other sense in which there's this broken republic, this failure across the board is in government. It's fragmented, it's, if you like, bankrupt in figurative terms. It's incredibly privatized. There's a big focus on the role of Elon Musk and all the oligarchs with their fingers in so many pies of the American state, Peter Thiel and Jeff Bezos and all the others. but that reflects a deeper problem of the role of private interests in many ways. In my observation, looking at America both as a government official and as a historian, commentator, is America has one of the most broken up, fragmented political administrative systems in the world. It's full of people who are sort of dropping in for a year or two after, before and after working in private business. It doesn't really have a very strong culture of government. And what's more, it is a incompetent vetocracy, and I'll come back to the term vetocracy a little bit later. But it means its checks and balances system has become dysfunctional. It's become something where nothing gets done, and in a way, that is part of the story of DOGE over the last 100 days. The conflicts between executive, Congress, and judiciary mean that everyone's pointing their finger at everyone else and not actually dealing with the problems of debt, deficit, and the US dollar. So let me just then add a couple of extra points, and I'll just quickly check on the Dash is saying that Trump only won by 1% here in the US, and believed perhaps that he had a bigger mandate than he was. And a lot of the commentators, I think, also got carried away. I think this was part of the problem with Alexander. They got Mercurius at the Duran. They got carried away with the optics and the rhetoric. Scott Ritter, perhaps most of all, and confused, a few passing weeks of euphoria with a cultural revolution. So Riang says they're all bought and paid for. Absolutely. This is to do with all those sort of private interests and a lack of ethical, control over things. But I just want to share with you a couple of slides just to dig a little bit deeper into this sort of domestic crisis in America. And some of these I've also shared with you on in the couple of upper videos. And in a way, perhaps the most critical one, this is the one Emmanuel Todd focuses on, the most fundamental test of a government, really, isn't it, is, protecting and lengthening the life of its citizens. And America has had this problem over the last decade, very unusual problem around the world of stagnant or declining life expectancy. And what's more, it's had that with the most expensive healthcare system in the world. It spends 16 to 18% of GDP. I can't quite exactly remember the figure off the top of my head. One of the things Emmanuel Todd does in his book is he if you like, deflates the American economy for the excessive expenditure, excessive cost of healthcare in America, and finds that on that basis it actually is a less rich country than its European counterparts, who actually do have a functional healthcare system and a functional social state. But this graph shows you this dramatically. The United States far over there on the right-hand side. I think I don't have any pointer that I can show you with, but you can see the sort of orangey sort of United States way over on the high health expenditure end, but basically with the same level of life expectancy as its rival, its strategic competitor, the one who's allegedly pillaging Americans, China. China, which has come from, astonishing tragedy and suffering and poverty through World War II and the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution that has undergone an extraordinary transformation really since the mid-1970s. All of that, and now has the same life expectancy as people in America, but it spends roughly 1/10 of what America does on healthcare costs. And what's more, one of the most fundamental measures of a functioning society, a functioning government, a functioning healthcare system is infant mortality. I mean, one of the early drivers of the increase of infant mortality in the early part of the late 19th, early 20th century was the decline in infant mortality. Usually it used to be quite common for children to die in the first year or two of life. It's become much, much rarer, and life expectancy has increased more due to improvements in, management of heart disease and stuff like that for people later in life. It's been the decline in sort of post 50 years old mortality that has really been the driver of a lot of the growth in life expectancy across most countries in the world, not in America, over the last 40 or so years. But in America also we have this extraordinary thing that Manuel Todd points out pointedly, that its infant mortality rate is now higher than Russia. Russia, which, lost 27 million people in World War II and suffered the social catastrophe, or the moral catastrophe, let's say, of, post-Stalinist totalitarian or communism, the decline of the Soviet Union, and then the astonishing social and economic collapse of the 1990s, a really tragic thing that many people in America gloss over. But Russia now has a higher infant mortality rate than the United States. And interestingly, it was infant mortality rates and their worsening nature that led Emmanuel Todd to predict the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1970s. And then we have the astonishing figures around the drug problem in America, particularly the opioid epidemic, not just in the USA, but it's also a significant issue in Canada, if perhaps better managed in Canada. And here you can see some figures on US overdose deaths by sex between 1999 and 2022. Now, for a large period of this time, it was from 2006 to 2022, I was working in the Department of Health in Victoria, in Australia, and for many of those years, I was for all of those years, pretty much, I was either directly or indirectly involved in alcohol and drug policy. And I can tell you, I've been observing this tragic increase in overdose deaths in the United States fairly closely for many years. And you can just see how astonishingly bad it has become. I was aware of it as a major problem in, like 2008, 2009. And since then, it's got 2 or 3 times worse. And it's astonishing. And, other countries, other rich countries around the world certainly have their drug issues, but they do not have this kind of astonishing problem. And I did also a video on how the United States can't blame China for its fentanyl problem, which I think is also in the in the video description below. And one of the key measures that health bureaucrats, health epidemiologists, health specialists, health policy specialists look at is this one here of healthy life expectancy. And I'll just do this so you can maybe see it a little bit more clearly. And it's countries ranked by healthy life expectancy. Now, healthy life expectancy is a kind of statistical measure that I guess discounts the increase in life expectancy for the years of illness or disability towards the end of life, dementia or serious compromised living in some way or the other. Some people say people are getting older, but they're just spending many, many more years in serious illness. That's not entirely true, at least not outside America. Healthy life expectancy has been increasing in Australia. It's one of the boons of the last 100 and so years that we live not only longer lives, but longer, healthier lives, longer lives in good physical and mental health. And the top country in the world is Singapore, which has a healthy life expectancy level of 73.6 years. So, discounts maybe about 7 to 10 years of total life expectancy. And Japan is up at the same level. South Korea, Iceland, Luxembourg, Norway, Switzerland, Sweden, Spain, Israel, and Australia comes in number 13 at 70.6. The United States ranks 71 in the world. Hardly the start of a golden age. Its healthy life expectancy is 63.9, which is 10 years less than the citizens of Singapore. Again, a really stunning difference. And then look, finally, just quickly, a lot of people have talked about this problem of executive order, as executive orders also representing the decline of the quality of American government. There's reliance on executive orders. I wonder sometimes if executive orders are all that different from media releases. And you can see here that there has been a significant increase in the executive orders under Donald Trump. But a large number of them are about reforming, shrinking the bureaucracy. They're relatively unimportant acts. I don't think they're necessarily they're statements about closing US aid or whatever, which are things that are administrative decisions that many governments around the world make. It's hardly a total crisis. And that brings us on to DOGE. Let me just quickly have a little check here on the chat, and I'll have a quick sip of coffee. And I can see that so Riang refers to wholesale corruption in America. Yeah, and it's certainly a pretty, there've been congressional figures convicted for quite blatant corruption. And then there's the kind of corruption we see in some of the speculation about motives for some of the, tariff and economic decisions in recent times. And Kuznet says Brzezinski, for example, criticized the traditional European welfare state and advocated that the Europeans dismantle it in order to be able to arm themselves. And that is exactly what is happening now. Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you what, if you're listening from Europe, in Europe, or I guess Canada's already got this message. Canada has a quite successful welfare state and health system as well. uh, pay no attention to J.D. Vance or any of the, many of the sort of American commentators across the board, really, who refer to lazy Europeans and their soft welfare state. This is a simple nonsense, and we'll get to this. I mean, this comes to the toxic triangle of the United States right now, that it's got a bloated empire, which means it spends ridiculous amounts of money on military issues. It has a shriveled domestic state. It doesn't do enough on welfare, on health. It spends a lot, but it doesn't spend it effectively. And but even then, it perhaps doesn't spend all that much. But we'll get into some of those details shortly. And it has a broken political system, so that no one is able to make the decision to say, hang on, guys, let's close some of those bases, let's stop the wars, let's try to repair what's going on at home. Instead, we're sort of caught in this toxic triangle of the United States right now. So let's have a look at DOGE. And again, I think this is a incompetent meme response to a major problem. Now, I don't know, when it first came out, DOGE, I remember on the X or Twitter, the incompetence even went to the level of efficiency was incorrectly spelt in its official little handle on X, and I think they corrected it after a week or so. Maybe it was deliberate, I don't know, but it was utterly incompetent. And but I also think the incompetence is shown in the way in which it hasn't delivered on results to deal with a serious financial problem. Its aims are were extremely ambitious, but not really thought through. As I was talking about saving $2 trillion, an aim that was reaffirmed by Elon Musk only about a month ago. And in reality, the results are showing that, maybe less than $100 billion, maybe less than $10 billion, maybe the actual impact on government spending will even be to increase government spending, or at least to increase government spending and or reduce government revenue, which would, as a result, lead to an increased deficit problem of continuing to send America bankrupt. And I think there are problems with the approach, particularly it's real. I mean, effectively what it was is they've got a bunch of IT guys to go through, use some AI algorithms, so to speak, to sort of work out a few questionable contracts and whatnot, and then labeled them as savings. They haven't gone through any of the hard decision-making process of actually restructuring how government spends its money, restructuring the programs, and working through the consequences of changing that, and actually delivering the savings as opposed to announcing the savings. And most critically, they've also avoided defense entirely. Defense spending is exempt. Defense spending is, with the bloated American empire, the key problem. And I'll talk a little bit about the reactions of different people to DOGE in a second. But let's just have a little bit of a look at this, because it is genuinely a serious problem, I think, in America. This is a basic graph about the American spending, American revenue. I think it's federal government spending. I'm not sure, and I'll get to that in a second. And the level of the deficit is roughly 1/6 of, The gap between revenue and spending is roughly 1/6. That is an awful lot. That's an awful lot. Now, it's not necessarily a problem that governments have debt. Adam Tooze has made this point, I think, very persuasively. Private debt and public debt are, different propositions. The shop down the road that has a big debt could go out of business tomorrow. The government in Washington or in Canberra is not going to disappear tomorrow, and fundamentally it has a legal power and the soldiers to back it up to collect the money if it needs to from its citizens through taxation. So debt from governments is not necessarily a terrible thing. Too much debt can be a big problem, and in particular, too much debt when it leads to very, very high interest payments. And this is part of the issue that is happening in America. The problem is part of that that gap in revenue and spending is more and more of that share, that big green bar there, is spent on interest payments rather than anything actually productive. It's just paying back the debt. And that squeezes people, it squeezes the scope to do the good things that people want to do. So there is a significant problem with American debt. And it's developed over a very long time. Now, you can see here this chart on total government spending and revenue as a percentage of GDP, where the blue is federal government expenditures, and you can maybe just see the sort of blue line that's sort of running through there that represents federal government revenue percentage. You can see it's been less than they spend for all but a few years since, I don't know, since about, what's that, the 1950s, maybe? So it's a chronic problem of, spending more than you're earning. And then there's also, of course, 3 levels of government in the United States. It's not just federal government expenditure, and Elon Musk, I guess, is largely focused on that, which is the largest share. But there's also state government expenditure and local government expenditure, and a lot of the real services in America, like schools and health and things like that, police are delivered at those kind of levels, as they are in many countries, including Australia. And of course, you can see there are a couple of big spikes there. One is around in the 1860s. One is around 1914 or 1916, and one is around 1941. And of course, they're all sort of the Civil War, the first America's late entry into the First World War, and America's late entry into the Second World War as well. But since then, and then, of course, a big spike, similar but not quite such intense spike around about 2000, shortly afterwards, which again is related to war factors. So that kind of pattern, you can see, is not going to go away in a day. It's not going to go away in 100 days. It's not going away because Elon Musk has employed a bunch of software guys to come up with some things, a few sort of gimmicky cuts without really thinking through the consequences. And of course, all of those levels of government, you can see there the breakdown of government spending, with about a bit less than a quarter on health, a bit less than 20% on education, about 12% on defence, much bigger in, obviously, that's all concentrated in the federal government, and, relatively low proportions on social security and welfare. And you can see there 6% of the year-to-year spending of the United States in 2022 was going to interest payments. So that's just, that's a ticket to nowhere. And this also breaks down, I won't go into detail of this, but this is just to show you the sort of flow. And basically, when you're in government, there's basically mandatory spending and there's discretionary spending. And a lot of the things that you spend, you're basically committed to. Like, people need their pensions, people need their hospital services, their superannuation or veteran support, all those kind of things. The military bases need to keep on. They're not just things you can click your fingers and away they go. So there's a much smaller proportion, which is really described as discretionary outlays. And discretionary outlays there, it's like 1.7 compared to 4.4. So what's that? That's about less than 20%, I'd say, roughly. Maybe roughly 20%, I think. I'm just quickly doing the mental maths in my head. And even then, the reality is it's really only a proportion of what are described as discretionary outlays are really, really easily moved around because, are we just going to close down the trains? Are we just going to close down the veterans benefits? Are we just going to close down the entire parks and recreation services? So it's a much when you actually, and people in government find this, actually finding real savings in government that don't have drastic consequences for people is actually harder than people might imagine, where people will talk endlessly about waste and all that sort of stuff, but it's harder than you might imagine to actually find real savings. But one area which I guess is incredibly discretionary, but related to the bloated empire point of the toxic triangle of the US state, is defense spending. And here you can see a graph showing historical defense spending in the United States. Pretty static in the years of Richard Nixon and détente, dropping briefly, I guess, at the end of the Vietnam War, before climbing back again, as Zbigniew Brzezinski, who I saw someone comment on, and Ronald Reagan started to rearm, reaching a high point around 1991, 92, and then for a few short years, a very, very small peace dividend before this incredibly steep climb that has really continued despite a brief, fallback in the late period of Obama and Donald Trump's first term. A really quite astonishingly large increase in defense spending from the United States. If you really want to find some savings in America, you probably need to reconsider some of your foreign policy decisions. And it's an even more complicated problem than that. Now, this graph is probably a little bit hard to see in detail, but what this shows, and this I got from the economic historian Adam Tooze, it shows the civilian employment by cabinet level agency or military branch in the United States. I think, which year is it? 2024, and over the last 20 years or so, and you can see how it's changed. You can see right up the top, the biggest wedge is the Department of Veterans Affairs. All those endless wars, surprise, surprise, have increased the number of retired, veterans, injured veterans, traumatized veterans, the nature and complexity of their benefits, and the staff required to provide them support, and all the rest of it. That is now the biggest function in the sort of employment function in the United States government, actually managing the sort of the wrecked lives, or the suffering and the pain and the illnesses and the patriotic support for the veterans of the United States endless wars. And in total, roughly 2 in 3 of US civilian government employees are actually in military agencies: Veterans Affairs, Homeland Security, Army, Navy, Air Force, Defense. It's not just the soldiers, it's all the other related functions that relate to that, bloated military spending, and the procurement and the coordination and all the other sorts of issues. The Department of Education, which DOGE and Donald Trump abolished, you can just see right at the bottom. It's barely visible. I can't even tell. I think it's a grey line. It's a tiny proportion of government spending, utterly tiny. So totally. So the idea that we just don't focus on defense and DOGE is really, truly delusional. So DOGE, I say, is really a failure of the US political system. And in part, this is based on my own experience thinking, both observing and participating in government spending reviews. Now, in the way I see DOGE and Elon Musk coming in, DOGE, it's not some absolutely astonishing thing. As I say, I think it's a legitimate problem that needs a genuine solution. But the fact is, Elon Musk is not offering a genuine solution that really deals with the problems and works through the problems and works through the consequences of his proposed solutions. It is just something that has happened quite a lot in governments over the years, including Australian governments and other governments around the world, is to do a spending review, especially after a new government is elected. In both federal and state governments in Australia, especially with the kind of more conservative parties, when they are elected, they will often appoint what's called an audit. They call an audit commission. It's been the term of the favoured term in Australia. There was an audit commission established after Tony Abbott won the election in, I think it was 2013. And it was led by a leading businessman, Tony Shepherd. And it was, given a lot of high-profile publicity and given a relatively short timeline, a not dissimilar timeline to what Elon Musk has, to come up with a report, and not just a report, but, sweeping recommendations that the government can implement to change things and to reduce government spending. And that happened in Australia, but it has happened also at the Victorian government level multiple times. I've seen some of them, and sometimes they work. Usually what they do is they produce a lot of ideologically driven recommendations, a lot of untested ideas that the government will then kind of back away from. This happened with the Audit Commission in 2013, I think most famously around a co-payment proposal for Medicare, the sort of health insurance sort of system in Australia, public health insurance system in Australia. But it's in the Victorian government, I remember there was an audit commission ordered by a Conservative government in 2010, and it did the same thing pretty much that Elon Musk did. It sort of did some clever analysis of the data and came up with a lot of ideologically driven ideas for things that can be just cut and done away with. And the report just got buried because it was so inept and so incompetent. What the DOGE is, in my view, is just a publicly performed incompetent spending review in a publicly performed incompetent audit commission. And I think that is really why it is a complete disaster. Quite apart from the fact that it hasn't achieved its aims, it has taken what Vivek Ramaswamy himself has said is a bit of he describes it as an IT angle. They sort of looked at all the payment systems or this sort of thing and thought that they could sort of pick up all this sort of waste on the basis of some very odd theories about how government finances are managed. Vivek Ramaswamy preferred to focus on stripping away all powers of regulation that are delegated from legislators to officials, administrative agencies in American government in order to just sort of totally disarm it, or alternatively get Congress to make actual political decisions to stop certain programs. And he therefore criticized Elon Musk's approach as ill-founded. He was right, but of course his ideas rely on government, on the Congress and the executive actually coming to some sort of political agreement about what government should spend its money on. And that is the problem, the fundamental problem in America. They have had this chronic, decades-long mismanagement of government spending, taxation, and also private interests. It's not a problem of Trump or Musk alone. It's a chronic problem of sort of the deadlock between executive and Congress, between the different sides of Congress, between the division of powers between Congress and the executive, the litigation of executive and congressional decisions in the courts. You can see all these things playing out again in the DOGE case. They've proposed savings. Congress has now proposed a bill to rescind their savings, and also a range of their savings have been stopped by courts because, well, the decisions were delegated legally to administrative agencies, and some wealthy businessman has just come and said, no, you can't do that anymore, even though Congress has enabled you to legally do these things, and Congress has the budget making power. So there's actually this sort of fundamental problem in the way in which government spending is managed in the United States, which has meant that they've gone for this gimmick, joke, meme approach to doing a spending review rather than the sort of hard yards that have happened in Australia, have happened in many countries around the world of doing, difficult internal assessments and political assessments that are followed through in legislation and executive budget decisions to actually manage government spending properly, not just cutting or whatever, but to also restructuring it, finding a more effective way to deliver education, a more effective way to deliver health, rather than just lobbying congressional interests and keeping it all rolling along. And interestingly enough, the political scientist, I guess you'd call him Francis Fukuyama, the man who wrote The End of History, wrote a much better book than his book On the End of History back in around about 2013 that looked at, it was called Political Order and Political Decay. It looked at the way in which political institutions actually function in the United States and around the world. And he is the one who coined this term beatocracy that I think I referred to earlier on. That there are so many people in the American political system who have a veto over decisions. The courts stop DOGE implementing the cuts. The president exercises a veto over legislation. The Congress, filibusters or revokes decisions or gets in the way in some way or the other. Lawfare is conducted. Administrative agencies do their own things. And of course, private interests are all over the place, especially in Congress in America. And he wrote about this chronic problem of the inability of the United States to manage its budget, the most elementary function of government that there is, over a decade ago, and referred to it as a long-standing problem. And let me just quote here from his book. The inability to govern effectively extends, unfortunately, to the United States itself. The country's Madisonian constitution, that is all those checks and balances and division of powers, deliberately designed to prevent tyranny by multiplying checks and balances at all levels of government, has become a veatocracy. When it's BETOCRACE, rule by veto. When combined with political polarization, it is proven unable to move either forward or backward effectively. The United States faces a very serious long-term fiscal problem that is nonetheless solvable through appropriate political compromises. But Congress has not passed a budget according to its own rules in several years when he was writing this, and in the fall 2013 shut down the entire government because it couldn't agree on paying for past debts. Everyone around the world just laughs at America in government circles, laughs at the ridiculous circus of American, political shutdowns, and the fools, the American commentariat and media who say, "Oh, it's a good thing," we don't believe in government anyhow. While the American economy remains a source of miraculous innovation, this was written 10 years ago, American government is hardly a source of inspiration around the world at the present moment. And the thing has got a lot worse over the last 10 years. So this is the problem. And this is why Francis Fukuyama in 2013 described the US politics as being trapped in a bad equilibrium, trapped in that vetocracy, trapped in a system of interests that prevent it from really functioning effectively. That mean that no one takes the decision to rein in government expenditure, to pay back the debt, to pull in the horns on the foreign wars, to pull in the military spending, the over the ridiculously expensive, ineffective, over-engineered, high cost, high value, but not all that useful in war, wonder weapons of the American military-industrial complex, as has been exposed in both the Ukraine war and also, I guess, the conflict in the Red Sea with the Houthis. No one really solves the problem. They're trapped in a bad equilibrium. And similarly, more recently, Emmanuel Dodd, in Defeat in the West, and in recent interviews, including a speech he made to in Hungary very recently, has referred to America being a defeated power in this profound social crisis that is preventing it. It is, in many ways, a collapsing empire, I think. But the question is, there are many different examples of a collapsing empire. The toxic triangle, I think, in the United States is not really necessarily something you'd look for a comparison with the British Empire or with the the Roman Empire. It's something I think that surprisingly I recently discovered in doing my deep dive in my world history tour, deep dive into the history of China, has a very interesting connection or comparison to what was actually happening in late Qing China. And I'll just say more about that in a second. But I think it's important to emphasize that this problem is more long-standing than Trump. It's more deep than DOGE. It is harder to get out of. And it is fundamentally related not just to oligarchs or, Elon Musk or, bad Donald Trump. It's related to this sort of combination of, a bitter social crisis within America and cultural crisis, I think, in America, a broken political system and a bloated empire. And all of those things are sort of a militarily overextended empire. And all of those things create this sort of trap, this sort of patronage economy, this dysfunctional political system, still caught up with its own exceptionalism. So I was surprised to read, as I did recently in my Substack at jeffrich.substack, and you can join there. You can join as a paid subscriber for just $5 US a month or $50 US a year. But in my recent part, the current leg of the World History World Tour is looking at China. In particular, in my deep dives that all my paid subscribers get, I'm looking at this book, Making China Modern, From the Great Qing to Xi Jinping, by Klaus Muhlhahn, who's a German scholar. And this book is considered by many to be the sort of foundational, the sort of new textbook, if you like, for understanding modern Chinese history. And it tries to, take a different approach to, I guess, if you like, let's simplify, of a pro-communist or pro-American capitalist sort of interpretations. It looks at how institutions have developed and had weaknesses in in China, driven by both local and global events. And in my piece, Opium Gunboats, Rebellions, and Unequal Treaties, How Modern China Was Forged, where I talk about the Opium Wars and the Taiping Rebellion and the late crisis of the Qing Empire in the late 19th century, leading into the Boxer Rebellion of 1900, during which, I should add, US soldiers marched through, the Forbidden Palace, Forbidden City in Beijing. America pivoted to Asia quite a while ago. In that in that piece, I actually quote Klaus Muhan's book. And let me just share that with you here. This is a little excerpt from my post. And Milhan says the essential problem for Qing's economic, social, and fiscal policies was the political centre's hesitation in adapting to the changing environment for fear of losing power. In America's case, it's fear of losing primacy. It can't adapt its economic, social, and fiscal policies. The Qing state was exhausted and too small to manage the scale of its problems. America does have a deficit problem, but it also has a state capacity problem. It doesn't manage its healthcare properly. It doesn't manage its social welfare properly. It doesn't manage its emergency response properly. It has been demonstrated by multiple disasters in recent years. It doesn't manage its infrastructure properly. It doesn't manage its sort of planning and governance properly. It's just a political bazaar. Fundamentally, Muhan writes, China was misgoverned because the state remained too small, too cheap, and too weak for too long. Elites protected their interests, status, and power rather than take the risks of major reform. They trapped themselves in a patronage economy in which an extractive institutional system emerged that benefited the merchant official at the expense of the population. Now, in the US case, the merchant official is replaced, if you like, by the military, industrial, academic, media complex, as Jan Oberg describes it, adapting Dwight Eisenhower, former US president's description of the military industrial complex. They run that extractive institutional system. That is the deep state or the elites that many of Donald Trump's supporters are angry about, and that the Democratic Party is as much part of as anyone else. They're not exactly not part of the oligarchy. As a result, social disruption, economic fragmentation, and institutional weakness resulted in a substantial loss of control, both internally and externally. Are we seeing something similar in the United States? I do tend to think so. I've thought so for a while. I've written about this quite a bit over at my Substack at jeffrich.substack.com, where you can join my World History Tour. You can join as a free subscriber or a paid subscriber. If you are enjoying this video, then please do like it and show your thanks, including, if you like, with Super Chat, and I will get to them in a moment. But let me just wrap up here with something that I wrote on my Substack. Actually, I'll just do it this way. In January 2025, in fact, as part of the piece I wrote around Donald Trump's inauguration speech, where he talked about manifest destiny and all that kind of thing, and America being the greatest civilization on earth in the new golden age. And many people got sucked in by that rhetoric, sucked in by that euphoria, as I've commented on in previous videos. But then back in January, I said, I do not think Trump represents that much of a change, nor that he or the American government and leadership elite have the capacity to deal with the fall of American primacy and the cascading changes that brings. I think that verdict has been amply demonstrated over the last 100 days, both in foreign policy and domestic policy. And I went on to add that Trump's rhetoric reveals a bluff blindness to the new realities of broadly distributed power in the world. I expect the USA to descend into a storm of self-glorification, self-loathing, and self-harm over the next 4 years. It may well precipitate a faster, wider shift in global cultural norms. It may provoke a broad domestic crisis. It may lead to a change of mind among American elites, but it most likely will not stop the ship of fools sailing on into the lonely Atlantic of the American mind. So there you go, everyone. That is what I think about the Donald Trump experience and how that's all gone. Let me just check in if there have been any chats that if anyone wants to throw in a chat now, do let me know. Otherwise, what I might do is, as I say, I will be bringing out some shorter clips from this live stream over the next week or so. I've also got some amazing interviews coming up on the channel. I've done some amazing interviews on the channel over the last little while. I've got another interview coming up with KJ No and some other great people, Warwick Power, Pascal Lataz, and a special surprise guest as well. I hope you've also enjoyed my amazing interview with Marta Havrishko and with Glenn Deason. In recent times, my interviews with Richard Sakwa, I hope to be able to do some more of those consistently over time here on the Burning Archive. And I think I'll probably be doing these live streams maybe every 2 weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, in between interviews and the other content. So if there are no other chats, and I can't see any other chats at the moment, although let me just double check my screen has not frozen. Do go over to jeffrich.substack, like the video, show your thanks. You can support me here directly on the channel, but I think the best way to support my work is by becoming a paid subscriber over at jeffrich.substack.com, and you'll get all my sort of weekly book recommendations and deep dives and other material, insights into both history, but also how history is playing out in the world. And I do hope you've enjoyed this little trip down memory lane for me to sort of draw on my life as a bureaucrat 33 years as a bureaucrat. You can find the link to my book, where I talk about the institutions of government and what's really involved in managing transitions of government. I talk about Francis Fukuyama's work on political institutions and political decay, and the complexities of government. I think it's probably the best book out there on the real book out there on bureaucracy. So you can find that at the link in the video description below. If there are no other comments, I can see someone's commenting at 3 a.m. But thanks everyone for joining me, and if you've joined me in the sort of replay later, thanks so much for joining me now. Please do leave a comment in the comment section, and I'll do my best to respond to them over time. I think I will sign out for now, and thanks all of those people who've joined me live and all of you for joining me. Don't forget to head over to jeffrich.substack.com and join my world history tour there. Bye now.